So first of all, Thomas, I just want to say thank you for dedicating the time to come on here and talk to me about some really interesting things, especially within the nonfiction realm and the creation, I think, of certain films nowadays, and especially being a lecturer and a professor of film at a university, I think, is especially a interesting place to be in. So if you please don't mind, sir, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tom Russell, and I teach production at Brigham Young University in the film department. And I teach probably more fiction than nonfiction, though the
Hmm.
project we're working on right now is predominantly nonfiction. Well, we have two. We have a fiction project and a nonfiction project. Um, but I've been here now. I came from the commercial, awful advertising world, which was actually a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and um, and then was invited to come teach, and I've just really loved it. So that was 25 years ago, and we've seen a lot of good students come and go, and worked on a lot of good projects, and um, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think I first off want to start off with asking this question because I think it's actually fascinating. Because from what I've seen, you began your career in advertising, like you have just said, and especially from what I read as a copywriter and director. And I wonder,
Mhm.
those positions and those that environment tends to be, in my opinion, very fast paced and idea driven, especially in the world of advertisements, always a race against the clock. And I kind of wonder how that has shaped you as a filmmaker and as well as a teacher
Hmm.
now in today's world.
That's a really good question. I think there was we had the director and writer David Mamet come and speak, and I had a chance to interview him. And I said, "Look, I'm not a theorist. I'm not a film scholar. I came from advertising." He said, "Actually, I prefer that." Yeah, it was kind of a relief because he's an intimidating person, but very nice, but very bright. And he said, "No, I like the efficiency that comes from that world. That you kind of have to." um, get to the point. And if you dilly dally too much, you're done. Your time is up. Your deadline arrives, and so there are advantages to kind of having to communicate an idea very quickly and clearly, and um, you know, if efficiently. Um, and it does, man, to your point, when I got here, one of the things that I saw from students that I thought was the biggest probably problem was that they were um, for a professional model, they were very, very slow. So the thing we worked on was look, you can have the best film in the world, but if it's gone over time and over budget because of the nature of making film, the enterprise itself, the film may be delightful, but the enterprise may not have worked. So it's possible for some very talented people out there to create great stuff and not get a lot of opportunity because, and this is for good or ill. You could make an argument that that's not a great thing, and I'd be all ears. But the reality is, you have to get things done on time and on budget. So that's almost as important as the quality or the impact of the finished project.
And I think as time goes on, I think as the industry has shifted and changed, that is still the main focus is budget and time. It always seems like things are constantly pulled by those two strains, and I
Yep.
find that really interesting. Especially in the sense, I mean, think about the way that, at least in my opinion, social media has changed this as well. I mean, we see a lot of
Sure.
filmmakers nowadays become popular through their postings of their work
Mhm.
on social media, which is also to an extent a very fast-paced and idea-driven landscape that is almost hard to understand in some ways. And especially coming from like an advertising side as well, I wonder if social media has played effect in how you think of it as well. Even forget about film, even just advertising in a sense, I think is all throughout social media now. I think that's the main
Yep.
factor that we find ourselves in.
Yep. You're very bright, and I think you're right on top of it. I think um, and like I said earlier, there are good things about this, and then there are not so good things about
Yeah.
this, right? So social media has also sort of forced people to become um, extremely efficient in what they do. I think it has opened a new opportunity for, I don't like the word content, but
Yeah.
for, for people who, for artists, um, people who have something to share. Um, and that's a wonderful thing. We've been able to, we've found people we wouldn't have otherwise ever found, um, and enjoyed their genius and the things they have to share. I think on the downside, um, there is a difficulty in attention span right now. There's a detrimental impact that seems to impact people's kind of capacity to be present with each other. I don't know how else to say that, and that's a very boomer thing for me to say. But the caution is, if we lose our capacity for solitude, if we lose our capacity for interaction, like presence with each other, like being in the planet, we have to sometimes, or just for enjoyment, we'll have our ears plugged with, earbuds, or we'll be on a screen. And I mean, what a beautiful kind of thing that we have. But also, if we're missing what's around us, we're like dying plants, and we can't figure out, why am I so anxious or upset or down, or, and sometimes there are really practical and medical reasons for that, but other times it's like, well, there's an opportunity to be vitalized by your surroundings that you might be missing because of distraction, short attention span, moving from thing to thing very, very quickly. It can, there can be a downside, a downside as well as a real cool opportunity for people.
I mean, I agree with what you've said, and it makes me think of another thing that goes along with this is like I think it all comes down to what makes a good storyteller to really capture attention still.
Mm.
And I think that's increasingly hard with social media because anybody can make a short film, anybody can make these things and be posted for the world to see, which is amazing. That's great because never before in the
Sure.
history of the world this has been available, even for people that I know and myself who maybe when growing up thought that those barriers were so hard to reach and those doors were so locked. But now anybody can do it.
Yeah.
But along with that, I would also make the argument that and this goes back to what we just said earlier about being in advertisement and being in filmmaking, you know, what makes a good storyteller, a strong storyteller, to even still capture the lessening attention spans of today's world? And I wanted to ask with that, I mean, what do you find to be the most
Wow.
essential qualities for strong storytellers nowadays?
Wow. You're asking the great question that everybody wonders about. Well, here's a confession, Broden. I watched a teeny bit of what you've done, and it's really nice. And the thing I like about what you're doing is, I have a great colleague who says, we always hear the phrase, well, it's all about story. And he said, sometimes, but sometimes it's really about also an experience. Like, that's another good thing about social media, is some of the stuff that you're seeing in really short snippets isn't really about a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
It's sort of an experience. It's, Flannery O'Connor said that she's only interested in exploring the mystery of personality, and once that's done, her story's over. She didn't worry quite so much about all of those kind of methodical approaches to storytelling, um, which are super helpful, by the way. That
Yeah.
construction can be really, really helpful. Um, that said, when I watch your material, I'm like, hey, I kind of get immersed in a vision, which is more unique to me than saying, well, I had my inciting incident on page 10, and my second act ended and my denouement started, and I had my twist and my pinch, and I had all of that stuff. You and I have seen a ton of that stuff that is just absolutely disinteresting to me because it's so mechanized. Um, and so I think, though, that said, because this is what people always do at the start, and then they go hat in hand for money, and somebody says, "Who's going to go watch this thing?"
Yeah.
It's we're in the kind of clutches of commerce, and that's just how it is. It's one of the reasons I like the National Film Board in Canada. I like BFI. I like people who subsidize and encourage young artists to give us a vision that's you can. Paul Thomas Anderson may not be what as wildly successful as a Marvel Comics film. I don't think he wants to make a Marvel Comics film.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure that the investors are like, well, we want you to make a Marvel Comics film.
Yeah.
But, so we get that. We get that there are kind of dueling interests that are super legitimate. That said, what you did for me that was very interesting is you created a question, and I needed to kind of see how that question unfolded in the mind of somebody who may not answer it in a super traditional or expectable way. I do think that we like to see people facing problems, people who are vulnerable, people who with whom we can associate because we're vulnerable and we're imperfect and we don't have all the answers. And one of the problems I think with the Marvel Comics model is it says, well, look at this really vulnerable person who now has more power than all of the earth. He can destroy anything, and he has and the only vulnerabilities come with kryptonite, which is, oh, but, well, most of us don't have a kryptonite because we're not really super powerful to
Yeah.
begin with. So I think people are drawn to story. Speaking of story, of people who want a thing, and maybe they're not super designed to get it, and so they run into opposition as they try to do that. And it's back to O'Connor. It's her neighbor that said, well, your stories are just about folks, what some folks might do. And
Yeah.
people thought that was too simple. And O'Connor said, actually, I think it's a great analysis. It is about what some folks would do. And then she added, would do in spite of everything.
Mm.
Um, so we look at people and we say, what is that person's what neurology? What is that person's pathology? What is that person's neurosis? What is that person's tendency? And because just saying every man or every woman or every person, in this situation is not may not be sufficient. There has to be something about that person that makes us want to engage. And then we throw them into an environment that may not be uh, super what inviting
Yeah.
for that vulnerability. So it's one thing to see a clown. It's another thing to see a clown at a funeral. That kind of conflict of ideas causes us to lean forward. And I think when the audience leans forward, it's a better thing than when the audience backs up because we're just giving them so much and so loudly.
And yeah, I mean, absolutely, especially with this idea that so many people now can see what we can create, and when we're so used to that mechanized feeling
Mm.
of a sort of um, pattern, and
Yeah, there you go.
and we get so used to it that that's difficult. And I think there's a formula that we get so bogged down in trying to recreate that often it's when we break out of the formulas that some of the most interesting things that inspire others. And and with that, I wonder, when we think about going back a little bit to what we have created and then shown to the world, I think about, your work has appeared in a lot of festivals, and I kind of want to talk about festivals and how you received feedback, good or bad, from these festivals. Your things have appeared in festivals ranging from Sundance and Cinevegas, and these really interesting places that I think people can come together from all kind of walks of life. And how has that helped you in creating? And what things have you heard that's been helpful and or not helpful?
Mm. Really good question. I want to clarify, by the way, on Sundance. We had a film once that was called a thing called a Sundance recommended film,
Uh,
which I don't even think they do anymore. So they got us into all these festivals for free, which was very sweet of them. But the most Sundance experience we've had is probably with our students getting to Sundance, things like that.
yeah,
But we've been in other festivals. Sundance is, a great festival, um, and when I go, there are, I think even the programmers of Sundance would say there are good things and bad things about what you described, the capacity for the artist to learn from the experience. There are good things that they'll get in terms of feedback, and then not so good things that they'll get in terms of feedback. I think it's easy to, anytime you're going to undertake any project, to believe too much positive press or to believe too much negative press. You know, they're all lies. The whether it's like this is the worst thing of all time or this is the greatest thing of all time, you have to realize that people get their words heard through hyperbole
Yeah.
by trying to, present the next big thing or crushing something and just, destroying it. The one thing I'd say about festival for maybe young filmmakers that may be interested in the helpful stuff you're providing is that it's going to vary from festival to festival. And it may be one year Sundance loves you and the next year they wouldn't have let you in,
Yeah.
or 5 years previous. Um, and sometimes there's a fit between a film and a festival. When we play at festival, it's interesting to listen and kind of watch a crowd, and you can kind of figure out when when you're getting a little too insular or something.
Yeah.
It's like time for people to fidget and to leave, and um, before I call them all swine and storm out,
Yeah.
I may have to learn something from. Well, I could have maybe handled that more efficiently.
Mm.
By the same token, you can come out and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a genius, and it's like, oh, it's a movie. It's we tried. Every time I think you undertake to make a film, you take a great risk, because it's so easy to ridicule something somebody else does, so much easier than actually making the thing. But I do believe in people getting their work out there, making lots of stuff, little things. That's what I love about what you're doing, Broden, is you're making stuff. And that's one of the reasons I thought, well, you'd be a good person to talk to, is make stuff and then send it out there and see if somebody may respond to it. Somebody may not respond to it. Don't be disheartened if you get a no. You stick with it, and it's not the final word on your film at all, for good or ill. Um, but yeah, I've been to festivals before, and you will too, where you'll sit and you'll think, really, that got in here. That's really interesting. Because there's no resonance with me at all about a project. And
Yeah.
then I might see one at another, which I did recently in another festival. They said, yeah, we were turned down at, and I won't name the festival, but it was a terrific film. And I've been to that festival and I've seen the films. It's like, oh, it was better than a lot of the films I've seen at that festival.
Yeah.
So, um, you just kind of speak to, as the artist, Broden, and your listeners do, the people that you speak to that understand what you're saying and that share maybe your sensibilities and or your sense of humor or your sense of irony or your sense of caution or your ideology. And you try to do something that you think, look, I can't speak to the whole planet. I don't know what people are going to like or dislike. So all I can do is speak from kind of my soul about the things that interest me. And if you do that, then like you said earlier, even if it doesn't follow a super traditional mechanism or structure, um, or formula, um, you'll have a voice that is singular, that's different, because you're doing something that you feel, you can say. It's your style.
And I think it's happening all the time from work just evolving. And I think, I think it goes in line with what you've said about we often come to these places and we go to festivals and we see things that get in and we're surprised by it just by we don't feel a certain connection. And I think that also in some ways connects to the idea that our tastes and our
Mm.
creative value changes over time.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great
And I think, there were films that I really enjoyed when I was
point.
younger and when I entered film school that now I just don't
Me too.
care for it. There's just
Yeah,
I just lost it,
and
and who
vice
knows
versa.
why. Yeah.
There's some that I didn't like. I got back to, and I was like, oh, that's actually really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so with you. That's a great point because it's not always, yeah, sometimes your own, you know, shifting tastes and sensibilities. Um, you learn some of the stuff is like, oh, I learned not to do that, but others is just your development as a person. You change as you go.
Yeah, it is changing as you go, and I think even within small increments of time, we notice changes within ourselves as creatives. And going along with that, I wonder how you've seen yourself evolved as time has gone on as a creator. And I think like, what are some of the things that maybe you focused on more earlier in life that now just aren't things that you really think about when it comes to creating?
Hmm. Uh, This is probably a bad answer because there's a there's a cheat in the academy, which is you have a day job, which is a pretty cool gig, and you can talk about it and you can make films, but you don't really, I don't know, your hat is sometimes kind of you're in the arena and then sometimes you're not in the arena. um, I find it kind of interesting that, you know, even we treat films now like gladiator fighters. You know, if they if they're vulnerable and we literally like thumbs down it, like
Yeah.
right, or let it live. And so part of, I guess, what has, but I think it's improved my work. I'm not. This is a paraphrase of, I think, Oscar Wilde, who said something like, "The manager knows the price of everything and the value of nothing, because for the manager, the value is the price." Well, in film, the manager is that person providing money. And in fairness to that person, they're giving us money. They don't want to just throw money away. They don't want to just go out and throw money in the garbage. So they want to get that money back. So I totally understand why for them the value is the price. I totally get that. Um, but on the other hand, it's very difficult to make a final judgment regarding the value of a thing. And in my oldness and kind of slowness and kind of, I don't know, my now relaxing point of view, I think actually my work has gotten better because I'm less concerned about making sure that um, certain interests are in agreement, right? Like in agreement with the decision that I make.
Yeah.
Um, it's and I got to this kind of late in advertising where I was like, look, you hired me. This is what I would do. You're paying me money, and you don't have to take my advice, but this is what I would do. And so I feel less frantic about or worried, I guess, worked up, and so m- that's how my work has changed. I do things like with this documentary, which I'm not really a documentary guy, but I find myself going, oh, I'm going to just juxtapose these two images because I'm not interested in B-roll so much, right?
Mm.
Like talking about a dog, so I cut to a dog. I want to talk about an idea and cut to an image that somebody doesn't associate with that idea. So they're forced to kind of think, why am I seeing right, a tree while while I'm hearing this? And hopefully they don't give up. They don't just surrender and say it's dumb. You know, I don't know, and nobody can know. I'm trusting them to be bright and kind of and do that. And then with the fiction piece, I'm actually storyboarding right now, and we'll shoot that in May. Um, and that's a feature length piece. The thing that's changed for me most is that I'm better at identifying and this isn't the only three, and this is by no means like a film theory approach, but that when we shoot, there is a narrative perspective, which is orient me spatially and temporally, let me know what's going on, when it happened, where it happens, who it's happening to, show me the stuff, right? All the nouns in sentence. And then there's a character perspective, which isn't about the audience's perception of what's happening, but it's the character's perception of what's happening in the story or in the experience. And I have to capture that, I have to communicate that for the audience. So it's not just like I know what happened, but I know what that character is feeling right now. And then sometimes it gets into, rarely, but sometimes it's about editorial or the storyteller's own commentary on what a character is doing or how they feel about the story or where the story is going. And so as I'm storyboarding, I'm thinking, this isn't actually a shot about the event. This is a shot about this person's reaction to or experience within the event. And I need to shoot it in a way that I communicate that rather than just saying, now they know that there was a foot race, right? But I need to know sometimes what the person's experience is within that. Um, so maybe I've gotten a little bit better at reading the script and just saying, I don't want to just shoot this proscenium style, stage style, make sure people know what happened. Um, and sometimes that's exactly what we have to do. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm talking too much, but there's this little once some advertising students came to me and they said, "Can you watch this commercial that we made?" And I watched it, and and I said, "Okay, well, that's well made." And they said, "Did you know what happened?" And I said, "No, not really." And they said, "Everybody's telling us they don't know what happened." And I said, "Well, maybe it's because we don't know what happened. That
Yeah.
could be it." And they said, "Well, did you see the guy? He was sitting there and he had his dog's shock collar on his neck and it shocked him." And I went, "Oh, well, what you shot was three guys watching TV. If
Mm.
you wanted to shoot the fact that the guy was wearing, a shock collar, his dog's shock collar, you needed a closer shot than that. We needed that. You were missing a noun in your sentence. And so you kind of have to look at it and young filmmakers often think, well, it's all about, adjectives and adverbs. It's all about, but film actually likes nouns. Literature does too. It likes detail. It likes tangible, concrete, specific things.
And I like that last story you just brought up because I think it's all about identifying problems, which I think
Mm,
is really interesting. Just, especially being in like a professor role and being able to oversee students now, I think is really interesting what people can see and how
mm,
people can do things from their own lens compared to your own that you've been with for much longer. And especially with working at BYU, you have probably dealt with hundreds of young filmmakers starting their artistic journey, and I think it's really interesting how people start and where they end even within their collegiate career. And as well, I kind of wonder like what is, even, the story you had brought up, what are like even like common mistakes that you see emerging within young filmmakers that you constantly notice or even have to bring up and instruct to kind of break bad habits in a sense as young filmmakers that we don't really understand, especially when starting out. We just don't get the science of it.
mm. Well, one is, as a rule, it's too long.
Yeah.
Um, as a rule, again, there have been exceptions to that. So they don't write for a small budget. They write for a large budget. So, their opening scene is, the Union forces and the Confederate forces are arrayed in battle. And you're like, oh man, dude, I don't think you can do that. So like what you do, which is really smart, is you're like, well, I'm going to make a short film and it's going to be short. And I'm going to use locations that I can afford. I'm going to use people that I can find that I know that are talented. You're not just, but it's like, and so they write within their budget, and they don't try to make a mini version of a feature film. Feature films are a different animal than short films. So I see that. I see students who are too they're staring at their navel too much. We call it navel gazing, right? But it's like, I know this is a personal story. I know this really happened to you. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. The great thing about advertising is that clients are all like, boy, people, it's going to blow their minds when they find out that we just dropped this to 5.7%. And we would always say, you know what? Nobody cares.
Mm.
Nobody cares about your product. Nobody cares about you. And if you start from the assumption that nobody cares, um, you have maybe a chance of saying, let me keep thinking about this idea, not so much so that I can make it something that nobody's ever thought of, but so that I can concentrate on small things that become interesting. I think that's something Vince Gilligan does so well.
Yeah.
Is he takes he'll focus on process for a while, just somebody getting ready for something, and work. we can find ourselves super engaged in just the process, wondering where it's going. The first film, I think there's a great interview, by the way, you may want to check out between Del Toro and the Coens, and they reference the first 100 feet, and I can't remember if it's Truffaut, I think it is, but basically it's kind of saying in the first 100 feet of a person's film, you see their DNA.
Mm.
And what I see sometimes as a student, I'll see that DNA and then it disappears because they get so much instruction that they're like, oh, I've got to hit all these points. And they sort of lose, right? It's like, turn that guitar right side up, Mr. Hendrix, you're playing it wrong. It's like, no, just let him play it upside down. Let him do that, and let's see what's in the DNA. So Hess was my TA, and he made Napoleon Dynamite and
Mm.
Nacho Libre and Minecraft, I guess, is the most recent one. And his first film was called Cardboard Only before Palooka, which was kind of the short film version of Napoleon Dynamite. And this is right. So he made Cardboard Only before he ever met me, and it's a fantastic film. So I'm saying that for two reasons. One, a student can think, boy, that teacher taught me all I know. I didn't teach Jared anything. I just watched and enjoyed what he made.
Yeah.
And maybe I was a sounding board for him a couple of times. And maybe I was able, with he and Jerusha, who is equally amazingly talented, was able to say, yeah, go with that. Keep doing that. Sometimes you just need somebody who advocates and champions what you're doing, and somebody that's very honest and says this just didn't work. And I'm thinking that good Scorsese doc, and Cassavetes coming up to him after I'm gonna forget that, and I'm too old to try and get his first film, that film name. But he said, "Don't ever do." He gave him a hug and said, "Don't do that again. What you were doing was trying to make a film that isn't a film you can make, or that you should make." But he gave him lots of love and affection. But when he made something good, he was also his champion. He was advocating for him. So find somebody that you trust that's going to say, yeah, maybe not this one. Not somebody who's going to try to be vicious and discourage you, but also somebody that can encourage. So Cardboard Only has no storyline whatsoever. It starts with a kid eating a gigantic burger, and then he punts it, and then he goes out and he milks a cow, and he, he puts a cardboard box on his head, and he walks around town. There's no beginning, middle, and end to that story. Somebody throws a milkshake, I think, at his cardboard box. You watch it and go, whoever made this is a terrific mind
Mm.
and isn't sweating so much. So an interesting thing happened, Broden. We decided that some of what we call our capstone films were becoming a little bit too baroque, a little too um, ornate and gigantic, uh, and students were trying to take on all the world's issues and all of the, and these are all very important things, but they're big, and for to try to just take that on in a short film, uh, you know, but when the department's matching money and you're coming up with money, you're like, oh, I gotta do something fantastic. It's got to be my opus. And so they'd try too hard. And it's like, I mean, there's a lot of athletes out there that know, oh, I know that. I know exactly. I aimed that too much, or I overthought it. And they say the best thing to say, when somebody's at the free throw line is, do you breathe in or do you breathe out when you shoot a free throw? And as soon as they're in their head, it just, falls apart.
Mhm.
So he was not caring about any of that. And even with Palooka, I think he either took a Bolex or a CP16 and a tiny little light kit. He went up into Preston, Idaho, and he just shot it for a
Mm.
couple of days. Um, and so I think we tried to make this indie model where we said, okay, students, now less money, faster turnaround. You have to make it with a smaller crew. You're going to wear multiple hats. It's back to what now, with the knowledge you have, it's back to you and your friends before you got into this program. And now just use the knowledge you have and have some fun and get together and make this thing. And all of them, tended to turn it back into a capstone.
Mm.
They just tried to pump it up and get its hair just right and do, and it was like, man, just have permission to play a little bit and use your imagination and make mistakes. I mean, that's the biggest thing is it was like you're trying to, you got to make some errors. You gotta make stuff that you'll look back on and go, oh yeah, I wouldn't have done that, but hey, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think that allows also for us to not have too many constraints as well, and also allows for a playing ground. I think film school is a terrific place to not have too much on the line when it comes to making films. I think often, and I'm a victim of this as well with all of my other people that I go to film school with, is that we often get so caught up and we get so nervous and we always just think about the worst contingencies for our
That's
films.
right.
And
I
we
do too.
often, yeah, and I think that's a natural
Yeah.
humanistic process to deal with mentally, but also at the same time, I think at the end of the day as well, often we take our films too serious. And I think
Oh,
we
I do.
often, yeah,
Way too
it
much.
happens way too often, and with all the other things I've said, it also I'm a victim of it. And I think we often have to, especially in film school, to take a step back and realize what we do and what it really means and the type of uh the type of freedom that we're allowed to have. You know, there is no real stakes with our short films because we're allowed
That's good.
to mess around and do that. And I find that interesting, especially, you know, with Hess and, you know, the films that we talked about. I remember watching those when I entered film school, and they're just so simple in a way. And it's like, wow, like
Yeah.
this, like these are not, I, I suppose to kind of word this down, I think often film students probably even back then and even now, I think care too much about, let's say, for example, among many other things, care too much about equipment and what they use to
Hmm,
make their films. And
for
often that
sure.
often that just doesn't really matter at all. It just
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting. And I think going back to what I started this with, I think film school is a great place to kind of make those early mistakes like we talked about and to have no real stakes and to still understand and figure out how this industry works and what these roles mean. And you know, we were just talking about, you know, you teaching at BYU and what you've noticed, but also as well, you know, you've taught media arts for many years. And I think that allows us to understand perspectives, especially as time has gone on. And as well, I think people put onto film school this idea that you don't need to go to film school to be a successful filmmaker. And that's correct.
Mm.
But also at the same time, I think film school allows us to have more playing ground, like I said earlier, and to make films with less stakes and still learn. And I wonder, you know, have there been moments or, you know, student experiences or breakthroughs that kind of like reinforce why teaching matters for film in a way and what and still encapsulates why film school can be valuable.
Yeah. Oh man. Yes, yes. Okay, so you're right. Uh, there are so many talented people that haven't gone to film school and they're just tremendously talented people.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know that it's so much about saying, "Hey, you don't have a license." You know, like you
Yeah.
can't, if you didn't go to film school, you can't play. It's like, well, of course we can.
Hmm.
So the question may just be, well, what might they have benefited, even those great, terrific talents, from going to film school?
Yeah.
Um, might we have drubbed it out of them? That's the danger. And I think it's incumbent upon teachers to say, look, not every student's going to be the same. And I got to make room here for a different type of filmmaker. Um, that said, yeah, I mean, literally, Broden, from the buckle switch breaking on an area and watching old celluloid stock, right? When we used to shoot celluloid, just accordion out of a camera,
Yeah.
and watching all those students with their mouths agape, thinking, how much did we just lose? And we have to go back and do it again. And I'm sitting there as a teacher going, this is the best thing that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
Because as a teacher, I'm saying, hey, how's your footage counter doing? This is back in days of film.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's good. I'm watching it. It's like, well, I've been watching it and it's been on the same number for the last 10 takes.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're moving any film through the gate. And it was all just cramming up. Well, I guarantee after that, all those students were a lot more careful about making sure, right, before they went in. You plan things that don't work. You said it perfectly. You're able to try, you get to fail a lot more. The stakes of commerce, which is over the head of these amazing talents who didn't go to film school. Of course, Steven Spielberg threw up every day before Jaws. He had to jump straight into the deepest of the deep ends and do this thing with stakes, as you said, already high.
Yeah.
And we look at that with admiration for sure, because man, but that's lightning in a bottle. Everybody that wants to be Spielberg or Hess or whoever, you're like, well, that is an exception. For most of us mortals, we're going to figure out how not to do a thing,
Yeah.
right? That we go through 100 ways how not to do it. And then we're like, but there's something in even those failures that, like you said, as long as you're true to yourself, is still truth. It still feels true. It feels like,
Mm.
and I don't know what other word to use, but it doesn't feel like it's a lie or somebody trying to make somebody else's film. It feels like their effort. The other thing I'd add to that, by the way, Broden, is, and I don't know how it works where you're going to school right now, but history and critical theory are interwoven into what we do. So um, it's great if you know how to turn on the amplifier and how to speak clearly and eliminate sibilance in the mic. What do you have to say, right? After all is said and done, well, I figured out all of the, like you said, I can shoot on an area and it's awesome, and I know every single piece of equipment, and I'm a technical wizard. That's great. Do you have anything to say? And so film school is also a chance to get together with your peers. And I think one thing I'd encourage people against doing is this love of hatred, like this love of detesting things or mocking somebody who likes something.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Malik, who was invited, and he rarely does interviews. And they said, "Can you bring a film that we can talk about?" And I think they were thinking of some real erudite, intellectual film. And I think he brought Zoolander
Yeah.
because he was like, "I just really enjoy that film. It's really
Yeah.
fun for me." Well, there's other people that get to say it doesn't resonate with me at all. I don't, I didn't enjoy it at all. But I've noticed sometimes that students get a little arrogant about, like, well, you can't possibly like that film because it's a Marvel Comics movie. So how dare you like it? And it's like, "Oh, I liked it." It might be a separate question. Do you think it's an important film, or so there are discussions, there are interactions in film school that you won't find anywhere else. And I think those associations, even if you're just speaking purely commercially, just purely in terms of career, and I that's a whole other topic, but I sort of bemoan the fact that universities have become trade schools where it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm here to get a job. um, I think it's a colossal waste of your money if you're like, right. I think you're supposed to learn broadly in a university, but speaking purely from a career standpoint, some of your most important associations are the ones you're making right now
Yeah.
in school. You're going to stay together. You're going to find a little tribe that likes to make films together, um, and those are some of the best associations you have. So there's all kinds of reasons that film school, I think, can certainly augment um, uh, your opportunities and your voice and your perspective.
Mm.
Um, and then we hope that as students at film schools, we also don't become like guardians at the gate saying, well, unless you have your papers, we're not going to let you in.
Yeah.
It's like, well, of course, plenty of room.
And often film school feels like that, especially people who are in it as well, and
Yeah.
people my age. There is a semblance of what is, you know, like what's a film and what's a movie and what's important and what's not. And I think that is bogging to begin with, but also I think it leads to the critical theory and the history of it all.
Yeah.
For example, we talk about, what students want to make, and often similarly, people want to make films here about these grand ideas, which are great. It's cool, but often with what you have, that's just not worth your time or money. It's just not. I think it's all about bringing these grand ideas and plot devices and stories to a smaller level. I think that's smart to do. And I'll tell you what, at the University of Colorado in Denver, I think we focus a lot more on production, the technicality of it all, and what equipment does which, and why this does that, and what theory I think believe in my opinion, falls into that. It's sort of on the sideline. Along as with history, you know, going back to what you were saying about you know how to turn a camera and turn a microphone, but what do you have to say? For us here, it's mostly left to our own devices of what we want to say. So anybody can make really whatever they want to make. And that is a freedom that I am grateful for. You can make
Yeah.
basically all in all what you want to make. But at the same time, I think that can be difficult for students who have no idea what they want to make. And I think that's hard. And I think that also brings up good questions of like, well, what type of stories do you want to tell? And I think it's different for everybody. You know, I have the stories I want to make, I want to tell, and I listen to some of my friends and what they want to make, and it's something I have no interest in, but that is also, you know, cool because you're allowed to then do that. And I
Yeah.
think especially um, as you know, writers and directors and filmmakers as a whole, I think we often talk about ideas and what we want to make. And often, along with that, we talk about ideas that won't leave us alone and something that keeps nagging at us to make. And I want to ask for our last question, you know, what is one theme or story idea that you keep thinking about that
Hmm.
you want to make or that you know you keep in the back of your head as something that always kind of nags at you to be created?
Okay, that's good. I um well, I'm old. So something happens when you get old, which is like you're kind of happy to just watch your grandkids spray each other with a hose, right? In the
Yeah.
backyard.
Yeah.
Like so when I was young, there I often uh ideas and projects and things just kind of come flying at you. And because I write, I was always writing something. I have scripts that are just sitting there, um, and the one that we're making now is one I probably wrote, I don't know, a long, long time ago when um, it was a thing that was really present in my mind. I think the challenge, and I'm going to get exactly to your question, but I want to kind of take a turn if I can, right, to get to it,
Yeah.
because of something you said that was really good. Um, it, there's I mean, it's one thing to say, I tried to make a movie about two friends who are, on a drive to go to their cousin's funeral. Um, and another person who says, I want to make a film about aliens that invade Earth in the time of King Henry VIII. Well, it's a cool idea. But when you fail with something that is in its design intended to be extremely sophisticated, the failure becomes comedic, just fully comedic. It's you set yourself up for tremendous failure by taking on a thing. It's sitting down right in Carnegie Hall at a grand piano and then playing chopsticks. It surprises everybody's expectation. So part of the thing that I'd encourage people to do, and the thing that I do as I age, and this is how I'm going to get back to that really good question you've asked, is I don't, my imagination doesn't roam as broadly as it used to in terms of having aliens land, at Westminster Abbey or something,
Yeah.
in the 1500s, or combining ideas, or having a kid that can fly, or having, well, whatever it is that we tend to do when we're kind of in purely in the world of imagination through life experience. And you've had this, and this is something old people do that's annoying, is but it's true. The older you get, the more things happen. the more often, not the only difficult things, but more things, people you love go through difficult things. And so the older I get, the more I kind of look back and go, I clearly am interested in stories. This is a general question to a specific answer to a specific question, but stories that focus on signifiers. And that means things that point us at bigger things, at other things. And so, for personal reasons of loss and and trauma and difficulty, I am drawn to stories that find meaning or purpose. I get that there are a lot of great artists that are like, look, it's all dumb. Nothing, there is no meaning and there is no purpose. At that point, it's hard for me to justify making a movie, let alone waking up each day.
Yeah.
Because I just think, well, if we're just bugs on a rock floating through nothing and then we blow up in the sun,
Yeah.
I don't know what the point is. And I guess you could make a poem about, well, it was the striving, it was the, but it all just feels like a strange fiction to me. So I'm drawn to things where I see, and it doesn't have to be a transcendental purpose, though my experience has kind of probably drawn me that way. But it's people seeing meaning in each other, seeing purpose and dignity in existence. Um, because I think Bellatar said it best. You know, if you're not optimistic, why make a movie?
Yeah.
If there's not something, and I think people are drawn to, like, they want meaning. I think we want meaning. Starting from a position of authority is a challenge when it comes to stories like that, like saying, "Oh well, I'll tell you what the meaning is." That's a challenge for, especially at BYU, because it's a religious school, and so people are like, "Oh, well, I know how the universe works." It's like, well,
Yeah.
actually, we don't. So, um, so question and wonder. So yeah, that's what I guess draws me. So the one that, yeah, we'll make next is kind of about all those things,
Yeah.
signifiers that signify bigger things, and then that process of young people moving from childhood and the belief in just kind of unbridled magic, you know, it's just magic, to, oh, magic isn't what I thought magic was. But not necessarily just trying to snuff it out, because I just don't know what the point is after that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think immensely I agree with why make a film if you're not optimistic is amazing because it's like I often make films about darker subject matters, but it's in a sense that things will change or this is not how it is forever. So in a way I relate to that because often
Yeah.
I've been led to believe, for example, that we might be bugs in a rock and we will explode. But part of me tells me otherwise. But then
Mm.
parts of me tell me that that may be true. So it's constantly a tug of war with those ideas and feelings that I think we will just truly never know. But
You sound
they're
like an
interesting.
artist. You're talking like an artist, because artists are all about that thing, right? That is underneath what is, because I think Elizabeth Barrett Browning said it well. If we're just duplicating nature, then art is just a duplication of nature. It's photorealism in painting. There's something existing, and we don't have all the answers. But man, I love the way you said that. I like the end. I think Huxley got it right at the end of Brave New World when he's
Yeah.
when when the savage is saying, "Look, I want sorrow and disease and cancer and poetry and God, and I want all these things." And they're like, "Well, we would rather make things convenient and predictable and kind of technologically sound." And he's like, I don't want it." And so and then some people will. Some people are like, just as long as trains run on time, that's all I want, and that's fair too. But um, I'm with you, and I also agree, Broden, that sometimes it's dark material that more causes us to ask the questions, the really important questions. So it's not just all, happy, thin stuff. It can be dark content um, that asks. I thought the last season of Fargo went as like deep into dark as it could, and then emerged in this like transcendent,
Yeah.
gorgeous, amazing place. But yeah, I certainly appreciated the light, by that time. But had it just ended in that dark place, I would have thought, well, I could have experienced that just going outside.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's often the turnarounds that I think make the biggest impact, especially when it comes to subverting, first of all, audience expectations and allowing ourselves to feel things that maybe we don't want to feel. Being uncomfortable and all these other things allow us to grow in some ways as humans, but also in filmmakers as a way. So, Tom, I want to say thank you for coming on here and talking with me. I really had a good time.
Roden, thank you. It was a
Yeah.
treat, and thanks for your patience. By the way, it took a while for us to connect, and you were patient.
The end of the semester, this time of the year, is one of the worst times to schedule things all year. But I
Yep,
appreciate it as well for you being patient. So thank you very much.
yep. Thank you, Broden. It's sure nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Have a good one.
You too.
Till next time.